Thank you for coming. Welcome to Disciples Christian Church. Let me ask, how many people have read the book? We've got 4 or 5. It's a disturbing book. I've done death penalty work for a long time, and it depressed me. What depressed me more than anything was the legal system. I'm losing confidence in the legal system. I don't think it cares about the Eighth Amendment. They don't care about torturing people on death row. I mean, that's just obvious from the court decisions. And if they don't care about guys on death row, there's other people in the criminal justice system they don't care about either. And if you could do this kind of a talk in different areas of criminal law and even civil law, and I'm sure it'd be depressing as well. But anyway. Well, we're delighted to have this evening Corinna Barrett Lain as our guest speaker. She's just written a book. She spent 10 years writing it?
7.
7 years writing it, called Secrets of the Killing State, the Untold Story of Lethal Injection. And I believe she has a few extra copies back in the back room there. We'll have a reception afterwards for people that want to get a book and visit, and you don't have to worry about missing the Thunder game because we're going to turn it on back there. That was kind of at my insistence. Beth and Gail wanted to too. Anyway, we've got a hard deadline of 7:40 tonight to finish this talk. Let me tell you about Corinna, and then we'll let her start. She's a native of Montana. She has been a professor of law at Richmond University Law School for 24 years. She does not look like she's old enough to be a law professor for 24 years. She teaches criminal law, constitutional law, criminal procedure. She teaches a death penalty class. And her book does a really good job of going through all the cases, a lot of the big issues relating to the drug protocols across the country. There's a lot on Oklahoma in the book. You pick it up immediately if you've been involved in death penalty work. So it's a delight to have you here tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Corinna. Please welcome Corinna Barrett Lain.
Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. Can y'all hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Don. Thank you for having me into this beautiful, beautiful space. So the book, it was 7 years in the making. I'm a death penalty scholar. I've been writing and researching about the death penalty for 18 years now. And it is a dark space to be in. When I hear people who read the book, they say, I thought it was going to be super, super depressing. And it's not that it's not, but it's more infuriating. And so I just tell the stories is what I do in that book. But even though that's dark, there's a beautiful light about this book. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. And then I'm happy to talk about the book as well. But I really want to talk about the story behind the book. And this is so important to me personally that when the book was launched, and it was released in April 22nd. When the book was launched, I had a launch talk, and I said, I want a separate testimony talk. I want to give my personal testimony about this book. And so I did that, and what you have is leftover programs from that testimony talk. So there's a bunch of songs in the front. You can, this was my Spotify playlist, and they're really sweet songs, so you might want to look those up. But then in the back, it has all the pictures that I'm going to show you tonight and to tell you about the stories. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started talking about that. So There's, as to why I wrote this book, there's a professional piece and a personal piece. The professional piece was, as a death penalty scholar, I kept seeing in the paper all of the botched executions by lethal injection. And I had a research question, like I am a researcher, I ask questions. And I was like, why are they so bad at this? Why we know how to put down our beloved pets. We know how physician-assisted suicide works. We, have surgeries where we, cut people's chests open and do all of these things every single day. And the death penalty is one thing, but we're also, there's these torturous deaths. And so why are they so bad at it? That was the professional side. And I started researching it. And I will tell you also, I really didn't want to write a piece about lethal injection. I didn't want to write the article that became the book. I just wanted to know the answer to the question. And so I had been searching, why is this? And I was at a conference and talking to another death penalty scholar and said, who's done the work that is looking at this? And he said, nobody, you need to do it. And I literally sat out on that veranda at that conference in Florida with my adult beverage and said, I don't want to be the lethal injection girl. So I'm like, well, we know how this worked out because here I am, the lethal injection girl. But he said, no, you really need to write it because it's all covered in secrecy and you're a legal historian and you're going to need some research chops to kind of figure this out. And so, researchers were like, oh, somebody could read this besides my mother, this could actually be useful to the world. And so I set about researching it. And I was a year in when I realized that this article that I was writing and this puzzle that I was solving was not an article, it was a book. I think I was not even in the first third and had like 300 footnotes. And I was so mad because I did not want to even write the article. I did not want to write a book on lethal injection. So this was December 2021. And it was Christmas time, holidays, Christmas cards, presents, exams to grade from this semester. So I just set it down. I'll resolve whatever. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I'll resolve it after the holidays. Well, after the holidays was this conference that I rarely go to. It's the first week of January. And I'm always tired from the holidays. So I think in 24 years of law teaching, I think I've been like 3 or 4 times ever. But it was in San Diego in January. And I've never been to San Diego. And it was on the law school's dime. So I was like, I think I do want to go to that conference. So I went, and the way law professors relate to each other is, hi, how are you? What are you working on? What are you working on? We're a bunch of nerds. So that's what we ask. And so everywhere I turned was, what are you working on? And my world is very much publish or perish. What have you done lately? And I had already lost a good year and was back at square one. And I just felt very insecure about it. And after this one particularly stressful lunch, I went back up to my hotel room, skipped whatever the 1 o'clock session was, and got on my knees and prayed. I am a person of faith. I call myself a free-range chicken Christian. So I don't actually belong to a church, but I have a deep and abiding faith and relationship with this beautiful God that I serve. And so I got on my knees in this hotel room in San Diego and said, Lord, I don't want to write a book. And I don't want to write a book on lethal injection. And it was longer than that. I went on to talk about how long it would take and how bad this would be for me. And I really didn't want to do it. And said, but Lord, if I knew this was from you, if I knew it was from you, then that would change everything. But speak clearly because I'm not inclined to do this. And I'm leaning up against the bed I'm kneeling against the bed, and I just reached over to see if there was a Gideon's Bible, because I'm more of a Bible reader now. This book has done that, but at the time I was like, oh no. So I reached over, there was a Gideon's Bible, and I don't know, I just like reached over, grabbed it, and flipped it open. This was not thoughtful at all. And I took a picture, you can now see it. I took a picture of that, what it opened to, and you can see on the top left, those are the numbers. This is the top left of the page. This is where my eyes immediately went. I didn't have to scroll down. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. I recite my composition concerning the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. I said, well, I guess I'm gonna write a book on lethal injection. And so I did. I researched and wrote for the next, I guess it was another 4 years. So it was 5 years before I had that first draft. That was in January 2022. So this happened January 2018 was the call to write. And by the way, a better law professor would have said, there are 3 parts to my talk. There's the call to write, there's the call to wait. And I think a little flyer, I said something like the call to share. Another thing has happened since this flyer, and I'm calling that the call to go. And so now it sort of feels, the call feels complete to me. So anyway, this was the call to write, and I wrote and wrote. January 2022, I finally got a draft. And I was like, what kind of book is this that I'm writing? I was workshopping chapters at law faculty, and they would say, what kind of book is this? This is really written in a very casual tone, but it's based on research. And I'd be like, I don't know, we'll see. I just need to get it down. Then I think I'll know. It will tell me when I finish it. And really inside, I couldn't say this to my law faculties, but inside I was thinking, I don't know what kind of book it is. This is the Lord's book. I don't know. I'm sure the Lord will tell me. Well, the Lord did not tell me. There's actually no place in the Bible that says, well, it's a trade press book, or it's an academic book. So, I didn't know coming into January 2022, but I thought, well, I really want to speak to the people if I have my choice. And it's for the very reasons that you mentioned, that I've lost faith in the courts to protect. And by the way, in the book, it's not really a legal book. It's more, people say it reads more like investigative journalism than anything. But there is a space where I think readers get to that are like, how is any of this legal? Where I say, okay, here's what the law is right now. Here's what you have to show. And it's impossible. So I wanted to write it for the people, and I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to get what they call a trade press, which is a Barnes and Noble, a type of press, Random House or something. And for those, you need an agent. So I thought, well, if I get an agent, then I'll try for the trade press, and if that door closes, then I'll go the other direction. And I Googled, what are the chances of getting an agent? Because even though I'm a researcher, I did not research how to write a book. I did not research what this process is. And at least according to Google, which is always right, it's like 6,000 to 1. And so I was like, okay, we'll see. And I got an agent right away. And so I was like, okay, here we go. And she couldn't give that book away. She was a really good agent too. She, did the big presses, Random House and Norton and all of those. They all said no. And then she said, well, you really wouldn't want to be in those big presses anyway. You'd get lost in their medium presses, really good medium presses. And they all said no. And then she said, some small presses, they are going to love you. They all said no. And then she said, there's some social justice presses. They're going to love this book. This is an abolitionist book. And they all said no. And the last, it was December 7th. And we had two presses left, two. And we had been waiting for about 2 weeks. And she said, I got a really good feeling about this because, you know, the no's come in very quickly, but it takes a little longer for the yeses. It takes about 2 weeks. So you're deep in their process. One of these is going to come through. I'm feeling really good about it. And on December 7th, within an hour and a half, they both said no. And her last email to me, which I still have, is, I'm so sorry, Corinna, there's nothing more I can do. And so I cried in my office, of course. And I actually, because I am a senior female faculty member, I actually had plans that Friday afternoon to have a mentoring session with a younger female faculty member. And I like to do my sessions at off-campus beverage establishments where we could talk. And so we had plans, and I thought, I'm ready for that. This has been a terrible day. And I texted her, hey, are we still on? I'm kind of ready to go. And she texted back and said, oh, I got the date wrong. I'm at my daughter's school. We're going to have to reschedule. And I was like, oh, no problem. Yeah, easy peasy. And so I packed up my stuff and I went home and cried again and got back on my knees. And, I look back now, and it's interesting to me now because my prayer was not, Lord, I know you called me to do this. How are you going to do this? In that moment, I didn't have hope. I had hope in the Lord, but I didn't have, I remember praying and saying, okay, so it's not happening. Everyone said no. Everyone said no. I remember the dream is dead. Everyone said no. Lord, I don't know what this is about. Was this about obedience? What? And I had gotten lots of confirmations over that 5 years. And I got to tell you, I wrote through cancer in 2019, breast cancer. I wrote through COVID, and everyone in my house in 2020. And so it was like this, it was a thing. And, I didn't publish a big law review in those 5 years, and all my invitations were at a trickle. So it was a dark moment for me. And I was just like, obviously the dream is dead. And my prayer was, Lord, I just need to hear from you now. I don't know what you're doing, but I need to know you are still there. I need to hear from you right now. And I was kneeling against my couch, and I took my home Bible and just flipped it open, which is a habit that I had started from that fateful day, that January 2018. And I think I can flip to the next. Yeah, so you can kind of barely see it, but that's my couch in the background, by the way. And you can see it in your little flyer, but it opened to Habakkuk. And I read this passage. You can see it's the top left. It's not like I was reading down, it is right there. And I read the passage and I flipped back and said, what the is Habakkuk? And it rhymed with the Habakkuk. And I've never heard of that book before. It's a 2-page book of the Bible, y'all. And I just was like, what is this? And so I'm going to read it. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that read it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. I took a picture of that too. I was like, wait, what? And I didn't know how it was going to happen, but in that moment I said, I don't know how it's going to happen, but this is going to happen. Though it tarry, wait for it. And, I was like, okay, it waits its appointed time. I don't know what its appointed time is, but it's going to happen. And in the meantime, as I wait for it, make it plain upon the tables so that he may run that reads it. So it's like all the trade presses said no. And my other option as an academic was to make it more academic-like and go for an academic press. But that's not what the Lord was telling me. The Lord was saying, yeah, I know everybody said no. I want you to double down on that. Make it plain. Make it even more plain. I was like, okay, I'm going to make it plain. So I saw that and said, okay, I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. 2 weeks later, my husband was gone. I was up in my bedroom, and I never do my readings in my bed. I do them down in my home office, but my husband was gone, and I have a hardwood floor, and it was December 20th. My floor was cold. I was just being lazy, but I was like, I have this old Bible from the Army, and I'm just going to do my reading in bed. So I pull out this old Bible. It's huge. It's like this chain link Bible thing, and I just opened it, and it opens to Habakkuk. The exact same passage. And then January 7th, and now you might think like, oh, she has Bibles all over. I don't. I have 3 in my life, and this one doesn't really count because I hadn't opened that one in 10 years. There was dust on it when I opened it. But January 7th, I was in my office, and I call it my work Bible. And whenever I write on the death penalty, I do a reading first. And I've thought, like, why do I do that? And I always ask for clarity. I think I'm also praying for like protection because it's a dark space, and also for mercy for all of those involved, from the victim to the prisoner to their family. It's just so sad. And so I do a reading, and again, I just flip it open. And I had been doing that for the 5 years. Like, this is a habit that began in January 2018. And so January 7th, I went into the office to make it plain. And that's my work Bible, and it opened to Habakkuk. And I said, that's the only 3 Bibles I have. And it has never in the 5 years ever opened to that page. And 3 times, it's like, wait for it. And then I got to tell you, so I cannot remember the date of this one. It was maybe March or April or February, but I was getting a pedicure. It's a little thing that my daughters, I had 2 teenage daughters, so it was something that we would do together. Then they go off, and now I'm addicted to these things, So I go in, and it was a Sunday, and I don't have a church. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to listen to a sermon while I get my while I get my pedicure. And so I Googled waiting on God, because I was like, that's the season I'm in. And sure enough, a little sermon comes up titled Waiting on God by this woman named Stephanie, I don't know, Ike, I'm not quite sure. Never heard of her. And I'm like, okay, hit play, So I've got my little ear pods in, and I'm getting my pedicure done. And she gets 15 minutes in or so and says, and now we're going to turn to a little known passage in the book of Habakkuk. And there it is. It's the same exact verse. It's Habakkuk 2:3. It's the same whole thing. And I will say, I exclaimed, I said an expletive. And the woman was like, did I hurt you? And I was like, no, but there's a thing happening right now. And, so it was just like, I didn't know what was happening, but something was happening. And so I'm like just working, going, I don't know, something's going to happen. And I was giving a talk in Puerto Rico later that spring. And by the way, I just want to pause and say this too. I have wonderful mentors who are, above me. And in the law faculty, I had people asking, okay, what happened? What happened with those last 2? And I would say, yeah, they said no. And they said, well, then you'd go for an academic press. Like you like, be an academic. You're an academic. There's no shame in that, right? For other academics. And I'd be like, yeah, no, I think I'm going to wait. And several times I had faculty members, my agent, but people say, what are you waiting for? They all said no. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know yet, but something's going to happen. And then I would have to be like, so there's this passage called Habakkuk, and it keeps chasing me. And so I'm going to wait. So fast forward to a talk in Puerto Rico. I'm go to get my badge, whatever, and I call it the gauntlet. It's all these like little booths. And there was an NYU Press booth there. And the woman was just sitting there. And people had told me NYU Press has a trade press line. But I didn't reach out because Habakkuk, right? Like I was told to wait, so I wasn't doing anything. But I walked by and I thought, well, yeah, I'll just ask. She was just sitting there and, excuse me, is it true that NYU Press has a trade press line? And she said, yeah, we do. I'm the one who runs it. Why, you got a book? And I said, yes, I do, but I'm waiting. And she said, well, that's all right. Tell me about it. And so I did. And she said, do you mind if I ask, why did you write a book on lethal injection? And I just said, I know it's really strange and you don't know me, but I was called to write this book. And I will go to my grave saying I was called to write this book. And I showed her Psalm 45. And I said, I know it's weird, but that is true. That is why I wrote it. And she said, oh, no, it's not weird at all. My mom's a Methodist minister. And about 8 weeks later, I had a contract with NYU Press. And now I look at it and say, oh, Lord, you placed me so perfectly. Because if it's just a trade press, it's just about telling a good story. It doesn't have to be true. But an academic press, you have outside reviewers. You have people looking at your research. You've got the imperature of an academic press. And so it had the, this isn't just a good story. This is also good research. And yet it was the trade press line. And so it was this perfect little place. So I'll not keep you a whole lot longer, but there's two other little pieces of this story. I've now told you about the call to write and the call to wait. I get the contract with NYU Press, and as soon as I do, these things start falling into line, start falling upon me, really. And by that, I mean, I had really wanted in my heart to, the NYU Press contract came right as I was going on my sabbatical, once every 7 years, and we can't move it. So like, it's there and it's gone. And I really, really wanted to travel abroad for my sabbatical. My other two sabbaticals, I was a stay-at-home mom. Now we were empty nesters, and I really wanted to go. But Habakkuk was like, wait. And I didn't know what that meant. And so I said no to some really great opportunities. Just, asking me, do you want to talk about this? Or would you be interested in that? And I thought, well, it's just not for me this time. But as soon as I signed that contract, actually 3 things happened. My law school roommate, she is general counsel for one of the UN organizations. And she always travels in the fall, but this particular fall, her husband, who usually stays with their dogs, he had his own business things that were happening, just a weird mixture of events, and he had to be stateside. So I'm talking to my friend, and she said, she's got these 2 big dogs. They're golden retrievers. So they're big dogs. And she said, I can't kennel them. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, Katie, I'll stay with your dogs in Rome for free. Let me do you this favor. And I'll tell you, we get a weekend. She WhatsApps me and says, oh, I forgot. I've got this woman on salary and I have to give her hours. Do you mind if she comes and cooks for you 3 days a week? This is what I'm talking about, where I'm like, what? So this writing retreat, I used it as a writing retreat, fell upon me in Rome, 5 minutes from the Colosseum. Separate from that, I was having a mentoring session with someone else. She asked what I was doing. I said, well, I've got the writing retreat in Rome, but then I'm going to be home. And she said, oh, I know somebody who runs a criminal justice institute at University of Bologna. Let me connect you with her. So I talk with her and she says, don't even bother applying for a fellowship. You've missed all the deadlines. I'll send you an invitation letter. You're in. And then I looked at University of Bologna and said, it's the oldest university in the world, established 1088. And so it was like, I'm going to bless you beyond what you would even ask for. And then another thing came in Germany, and they actually were like, this comes with a stipend. We'll pay you to come. I was just like, and they too were like, no, don't bother applying. You're in. So like these things rain upon me. And fast forward, I'm on the writing retreat, and I told my family, like, nobody should come. I'm here to work on the manuscript. I knew I would be in Bologna for 9 weeks, and other people would come, and we'd go back to Rome and see all the things. But the week before it was time to go, I was like, I haven't done any of the tourist things. And I had been to the Sistine Chapel twice before, and I knew I would go again when I was in Bologna and had visitors. But I thought, how many times is too many times to see the Sistine Chapel? Corinna Lain, are you really going to go back to Richmond, Virginia and say, yeah, I lived in Rome for 5 weeks and just didn't bother to do it? I was like, no. So let me see if I can get tickets. Answer, no. You don't get tickets to the Vatican 5 days before. But I'm like, is there any way I can get in the Sistine Chapel? Yes. You can get in if you get tickets to the Vatican Gardens. So the tickets were Vatican Gardens and Sistine Chapel. So they're not going to let you in the Vatican Museum, but you walk the gardens, you get in the Sistine Chapel. I didn't care. I'm like, great. The gardens weren't on my list, but I'd be happy to walk some gardens. Sounds good to me. Even then, I couldn't get a tour in English, So I was like, so I just don't even care. I just want to get in. So when I got there, I didn't even get the little headphoney things. I just put in my Jesus Jams playlist, some of the songs you have on the little flyer. But, the woman, it was like, I don't know, 15 people or so. I'm in this little group. She's, her mouth is moving. I don't speak that. It was in Italian. I don't speak Italian. I don't speak that kind of Italian. But, and so I've got my music in, and I'm just talking to the Lord about the call to write, about Habakkuk, about like all the things that have happened, and just, walking the gardens and just talking about this beautiful journey. And I'm taking pictures of like rose bushes and statues, and I go to take a picture of this fountain. And I just wasn't even thinking about it, but the fountain had these little frogs on the side, and my husband is an environmental lawyer and he has frog cufflinks. So I was like, oh, John will like this. And so I went to take a picture of the fountain, and a white dove photobombed my picture. And to this day, I'm like, that actually happened to me. Like that, I took that picture, and I don't know how I took that picture, but it is a perfect picture. And that dove didn't even land. Like it just like in and out. And the other people were like trying, nobody got that picture but me, because I was already taking the picture. And so I was just like, and I'm just talking to the Lord about the book. So your little thing, it ends there because that's where it ended until May 26th. So this is just like in the last couple weeks. And so again, the call to write, the call to wait, the call to go. So the call to go was May 26th. So I was already planning this book tour in the fall, and was already like, okay, I'm gonna, I've got these invitations coming in. I don't think I can do it while I'm teaching. I'm gonna have to take off for the fall. Might as well go driving around. And I had a really hard day that day. It was just, bad in a couple different ways related to the book. And I also got the invoice of what this thing would cost. And it was, sit up straight and be like, oh. And I was in a hotel room in Chicago and got on my knees and was like, Lord, I'm a yes. I've been a yes. I'm a yes. But you know how you talk real clear with me? Would you do that? I could really use some confirmation that this is what I'm supposed to do, because I'm going to be traveling the South. They're not going to like me. Like, they're not going to like what I have to say. I don't know that I can change anything. I remember saying that. It's going to come at a somewhat of a personal, there'll be something there, whether it's time. I'm hoping my sister won't dump me alongside the road at some point in our visit, but it's going to be a thing. And so I was like, okay, are the doors closing? Are you trying to, what you doing up there? Are you trying to close? Maybe I'm not supposed to go on this tour. Maybe I just fly around to the people that have invited me. I don't know. I could use some confirmation. So I'm on my knees and I just flip open the book. It's not in your little folder, but this is the last part. And actually, I can't even see it, but I'm going to read it to you. Sorry, I probably should have found that a lot earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. It's, here we go. It's from the book of Ezekiel. I don't know. And it's chapter 2. And the picture's there, because now that's what I do, is just read the Bible and take pictures. And it said, and this is chapter 2. And he said, unto me, and of course the context is different. It was written a couple thousand years ago, so I understand that. And he said unto me, Son of man, stand upon my feet, and I will speak to thee. Okay. And it says, for they are imprudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them. And thou shalt say to them, thus saith the Lord God, and they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house, yet they shall know that there has been a prophet among them. I don't consider myself a prophet, but I am a girl with a testimony. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, not afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee. Be not afraid of their words, nor dismayed at their looks, for they be a rebellious house. And thou shalt speak my words unto them, and whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. But thou, son of man, be not rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat what I give thee. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, the roll of a book was therein. And I said, guess I'm gonna go. And so I think, I'll just maybe stop there, but I don't know what's gonna happen with this book. And in some ways, I don't want to say it doesn't matter what happens. Of course it matters. This is 7 years of my research. It's a big thing for me. It took a lot. It's the hardest thing I've ever done professionally. But, I don't know what will happen, and, maybe nothing will happen, and I would be satisfied because I'm trying to do what I've been called to do. But I just think something's going to happen with this book, because there is a grace on this book. And I don't know why, and, I don't know, but there's a grace on this book. And so anyway, thank you for listening to my testimony, because, when these things happen, I'm just going to tell you, as a researcher, I'm like, is anybody seeing this? I feel the need to document it. I feel the need to be, I'm very research oriented. And so that's where I come from on this. So I guess I'll just stop there. Is it still we're still okay? I'm afraid people start walking out for the game. Go Thunder.
Yeah.
But, I will also say maybe on the merits, since we, have a minute, and I would love to talk if you have thoughts
Could you
to.
talk
Yeah,
just about maybe 10 minutes, just an overview of the book?
yeah,
to-
sure
to
I
give
can.
people a sense of what's in the book.
Okay, Dawn, that's so fair. Dawn's like, okay, but there is a book. And you haven't talked about it at all. So, this book, this is not the sort of book where I make an argument and then try to convince you that I'm right. This is a book where I relentlessly document what the state is doing in our name. And I do it, I want to say I do it through storytelling, but they're true stories. But, it's not like dry facts and figures. It's, I'm going to tell you all about this, and I'm going to tell you all about that. And so it starts, actually, chapter 1. Oklahoma is all over this book. All over this book. Chapter 1 is the botched execution of Clayton Lockett. Yeah. And I managed to get my hands on 3,000 pages of recorded transcripts of interviews that they did with the Department of Public Safety. And very different than what we see in the litigation setting, where you have a deposition and they're very careful. They're only going to answer the question. They're not going to do any more. Very close-lipped. These people were downright chatty. And so we know, I tell the story through their words, and so we learn, for example, that the drug midazolam that Oklahoma uses was chosen by the lawyer for the Department of Corrections. And how did he find it? He said, I just looked online. I Googled it. He said, I went past the WikiLeaks. It's like, what? And that's the drug that Oklahoma still uses. That's how they found it. And I think even the investigator might have been incredulous because kept asking, well, okay, well, what else? And he said, I could have done some other things, but there was political pressure. This was political. And so it's a very different view. It's a very behind the scenes. In court, it's like, nope, we're doing everything carefully. We're doing everything right. How dare you suggest that we would not be taking good care, that we would not be following the law. Behind the scenes, and I document every single thing I say. As I say in the introduction, I brought the receipts, but behind the scenes, none of that's true. I tell the story of how lethal injection was devised. That was Oklahoma's medical examiner, Jay Chapman, who famously said, I'm an expert in dead bodies, but not in how to get them that way. And when they asked him, I found an interview, and he was asked, well, how did you come up with the drugs? And he said, it's all quoted and cited in the book, but he said, I didn't do any research. I just thought about what might be useful from being under anesthesia myself. He wanted 2 drugs to kill him, so if the first one didn't, the other one would. And then the interviewer asked the follow-up and said, well, why did you add a 3rd drug? And he said, why not? I didn't do any research. Why does it matter why I chose it? And so it's that sort of things. Like, yes, it's depressing, but I think it's more infuriating. Readers are, more fired up, I think. So I talk about that. I talk about who is actually doing these. And of course, we can't know in any given execution, but I managed to find out, really all that I possibly could. And the people who are pushing the syringes are non-medical prison guards. I thought it was doctors. Yes. Prison guards. Yeah. And they're not even doing it bedside. They're doing it from another room, and with 7 feet of tubing in between. And if you ask them, well, how do you know how fast? Because if you push it too fast, you're going to blow the vein, and they have bad veins in the first place, and generally, and they'll tell you, yeah, we're doing it by feel. And medical experts are just like, what? There is no feel through 7 feet of tubing. So, I talk about that. I got really, really, really deep into the drugs I would say that's the most technical chapter, but I wrote this for you, for the people, but I felt it really needed a researcher, not a litigant, not someone representing someone and making an argument in that representation capacity, but someone like my job literally is speaking truth to power. It is finding truth. And so it's like, it happens to be very bad for the state, but my job is truth, not creating data for any side or the other. And so I really wanted to get into what the actual science says about these drugs. I talk about the drug suppliers and that, whole thing. I document the state smuggling drugs across the border, getting them seized by the DEA, getting them seized by the FDA. Like what? As I say in the book, people go to prison for this sort of thing. As in, you and I would go to prison for this sort of thing. I have a whole medical, a chapter on medical ethics and really listening to what the medical profession has to say. I have a chapter on the prison problem that really just gets into like, okay, how do these prisons work and what is going on there? And, in that space, one fellow that I was being interviewed by, he said, the whole book, I'm really mad at the prison people. They're the bad guys. These are the ones I want to demonize, are the executioners and the prison people. And he said, when I get to your chapter 8, I feel sorry for even them. And so I quote them. Yes, there's some narrative, but a lot of this is I'm just quoting people to tell you these stories. And one of the things that, they say it over and over and over and over again is, by the time an execution warrant comes down, we've lived with these people for 10, 20, 30 years. And they're not the same person that they were. And we know that. And we've gotten to know them as human beings. And then we have to kill them. And don't expect that we can be normal, or that this isn't destroying our families, or that there won't be trauma and an effect from that. And so I talk about that. And then I talk a whole lot about secrecy, and there's secrecy statutes. So we talk about that. But I talk about other ways too, like here in Oklahoma, if something goes wrong, they lower the blinds so you can't see. In Tennessee, there was a botched execution. The anesthesiologist came in and said, by the way, just because someone's unconscious doesn't mean that they're not feeling things. When you are drugged to oblivion, you can be feeling it. If the drug is not an anesthetic, you're going to feel excruciating pain, but you can be so drugged that you can't lash out. Your body, it feels like you're wearing 1,000 tons. But they say, watch for the fingers, because that's the place that you actually have the most control. And so when you can't move anything else, but you're awake and you're trying to move, watch for the fingers, watch for blinking eyes. What did Tennessee do? Tape down their fingers. They're already in restraints. There is absolutely no reason other than, hiding so that we don't see. They turn off the sound, and they give their last statement and then they turn off the sound. Why do you turn off the sound? What is the reason to turn off the sound? There's no reason other than to keep people who are watching from hearing what's actually happening. And so all of these things make me very angry, where I just wanted everyone to know. And I guess I'll say a couple other things, and you can just stop me, Don. But in the epilogue, I talk about one of the things I say, I have this little 3-page epilogue. And I even wonder sometimes now, are those 3 pages the most important of the entire book? And I've had death penalty supporters read the book and say, I wish your epilogue was the prologue. I wish I had read that first. But I talk there about how, look, I'm just a researcher and I'm studying lethal injection, which means I'm studying executions. I'm not studying the people, I'm studying executions. But studying executions gave me this front row seat as to who these people are at the end. Not who they are at the time of their crime, not who they are at the time of trial, but who are they at the end when we are killing them? And by the way, and so one of the things that was super striking is they're not the same person. And so I talk about that in the epilogue, and there's an attorney that says, there's no reason for the government to kill him. In any event, they failed. The Dustin Honkin that they wanted to kill is long gone. That guy's long gone. This month, by the way, we will be, the country, I don't think this is Oklahoma's, but the country, I can't remember what state it is, but he's been on death row for 49 years. 49 years. And in Louisiana, just a couple months ago, they had 2 people they were executing. One they executed, the other one died first. He was 81 years old. And I don't comment on it on the book. It was hard not to, but I don't. But I tell the stories. So I will say, they rolled this person in on a wheelchair. They had to prop this person up with a medical pillow because he was on oxygen and they didn't want him to choke while they're killing him. This person is in hospice for cancer, and so they wanted to make sure that they killed him before he died on his own. These are the sorts of debasement, and I want to say that it's for the retributivists out there, right? Well, they did it, I'm like, do you know, like the guy the country executed just a couple days ago, maybe June 10th, yesterday, he started a church on death row. And there was another reverend that came in and was talking to the media about him. Of course, I'm just a researcher. I'm looking at all this stuff and gathering the data. But that reverend came in and said to the media, "This man is perhaps the holiest man I've ever met in my life. And he has started a church for death row, and he is changing lives of these other people." And so, one of the things I think about when I think about the religious right and think about the strongest death penalty support in this country is evangelicals. And I just want the word to get out. I want to say, you're killing your Pauls. That's right. Like, that's who these people are. Not every single one of them, but a lot of them. And they're not the same person. And that also makes it very, very trauma laden for the prison guards who have to do this work. And so I sit there and think, we're killing these people who killed someone, presumably, if we didn't get it wrong. And by the way, because I'm a larger death penalty scholar, I gotta say, for every 8 executions, there is 1 exoneration. That's scary. But assuming we got it right? We're killing someone who killed, but is no longer a killer. But then who are we creating when we ask someone else to kill as part of their job? What are we creating? And so those are the things I think about. And I also think, since we're in a church, that I can say this, in other venues I haven't, but I think when we have the death penalty, we're really saying that person's worth nothing. You're so bad, you don't deserve to be part of the human condition anymore, right? You're worth nothing. And I just think, like, God looks at that person. What I've seen from my study of execution for 7 years, God looks at that person and says, you're a God special. You're exactly who I'm going to invite in. And maybe they say yes, and maybe they say no. But the deeper the despair, the more broken, the more terrible, the more beautiful their testimony. So here's one for you. Do you all remember Helter Skelter? Tex Watson. Remember Tex Watson? So part of Charlie Manson's clan. He was the bad. If you didn't, I'm not even going to go into the, it was really, really bad though. He was, slit them and their blood on the walls and all that, pregnant people. And so he gets the death penalty in California. And then the Supreme Court strikes it down in 72, brings it back in 76. He gets commuted. He can't be put to death. And you think, like, that guy is pure evil. He's evil at trial. Like, you could just look, he had no remorse. You just look and it's like, oh, super scary. Fast forward, Google him now. He has started a men's prison ministry and is changing all of these lives. And what they're saying is, he's reaching people that we could never reach because we haven't experienced those depths. But they're reaching people that we can't reach. And, I always think, to the state, I want to say, you're getting your pound of flesh. They'll never get out. It's life without parole. They're not going to get out. If they do, and somebody changes the law and they'll be like 80, 90 years old, I don't know. But it's really quite something to be a witness to that thing. And I know that advocates like Sue and frankly like Marianne have been talking about this for decades. I'm new to the party. But as a neutral, I don't mean new, but there are roles, and my role is only truth. And so my hope is that I can make a contribution in this way, if only saying what you've been saying for years and years and decades is right. Maybe we stop there. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Don, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'll ask one. I've been witness to 2 executions. I was in the chamber with them when I was their clergy in the chamber. And the part of your book that made me the angriest, I guess, was that the purpose of the second drug, the paralytic, is to mask. They can still feel pain, but it masks their reaction. And the reaction that it actually causes in them to the witnesses is that they're sleeping or snoring. The two executions that I was at, they both snored. Yeah. And so then the state can present afterwards, it was completely peaceful, normal, nothing to see here. But they can still feel the pain. And I went to the 5-day trial in Oklahoma City that Judge Friat presided over on the drug protocol. I just went to 2 days. But there was undisputed testimony that all their lungs had filled with water, and they all suffered from pulmonary edema,
Yep.
which is torture.
Yes.
But Irving Yen testified, well, they can't feel it anyway. And that's what Judge Friot went with. But, you know, to see the complete absence of any medical
Yeah.
skill anywhere in the procedure, and the 3 drugs we're using need to be jettisoned and do something else. And the courts have already blessed it. You know, so where are we? How could we possibly do anything
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah. You know, so I have a couple thoughts on that. One is, you know, like I said, I've lost, you know, where we are in the courts, that's not happening. And so I did have a girlfriend who read this and she said, it reads like I'm telling mom. And I said, that's exactly what this book is. I'm telling mom and y'all are mom. You know, it is for the public to know. And I'm personally convinced that the courts will not take these claims seriously until there is widespread public distrust. Then they'll be like, oh, wait, because right now what happens is the state walks in and says, oh, no, we're totally careful. Oh, no, this and this is happening. And my hope is that this book, they'll be like, wait a minute, that's just not true. They're saying all this behind the scenes, and they're telling us this thing. And so, you know, my hope, I can't change the courts, but to the extent that the courts are open to it, it will be because of conversations that you all have. And by the way, I'm just going to add that I did a beta book club. I had law students, some death penalty supporters, some against, some unsure. And we met once a week, and they came up with the questions, and they loved that book club. And I thought, man, if people can, you know, if you start talking, that's why I often write, pass it on. You start talking, you're going to see something crazy. You're going to say, would you believe this? This is how you do it. But the other thing, and just to back up for Don's point, the 3-drug protocol, which is what Oklahoma uses. It uses this drug called midazolam. And no state will use midazolam without a paralytic. That itself tells you something. The second drug is a paralytic, and it's not only a paralytic, it's a muscle relaxant. So it relaxes the face, relaxes the muscles, and then it freezes them that way. And it works from the outside in, so the last thing it paralyzes is the muscles in the core, which is the diaphragm, which is what pushes air into the lungs. You know, there's an irony, or I don't know, a sadness. We went to the museum for the Oklahoma City bombing today because I wanted to experience that. And so I'm spending time, and I'm watching and listening to the videos. There was a woman who was trapped, and they had to amputate her leg. And the doctor said, all I had was Versed. Versed is midazolam. And he said, so we gave all that we had, and the other people are saying, and we heard her screaming. It saved her life, but I just was like, you know, we have known in every which way that this does not block pain. And, you know, my deep dive into research and into the medical journals and everything else. And so to come around the corner and see it there too, you know, it was a pretty wild moment. But, you know, that's what they use. And there was this, you know, the state had this one doctor, and the judge listened to that doctor and said, oh, he's a fresh face. And I looked at what he cited, was like an Encyclopedia Britannica. No, seriously. He didn't cite any studies that I was like, what? And it was just like, it was very surreal. And so I tried to afford dignity to all people, convicted murderers and state experts that don't know what they're talking about. And so I said what I said in text, but if you look in the back in the footnotes, I go after it. You'd have to be you would need to know that. I tried to not do anything. I was very deliberate. But, to cite someone who says, well, it's always worked for me. I've never given an overdose of it, but it seems fine. And he said, why wouldn't you give why you wouldn't use this for surgery, would you? And he said, no, I wouldn't use it for surgery because you stop breathing. And it's like, okay, what we know with anesthesia is you stop breathing. So I'm like, so I talk about those details in the back. And I did not write this book to lay tracks for litigators, but you can bet I laid tracks for litigators. So it's all there. And litigators, they don't have time I not only looked at the studies that the state was citing, the studies don't say what the state says they say. And I even found the author, the scientist of one of the studies who came out and said, that's not what my study says. Litigators don't have time to go find this stuff. So my hope is that there's perhaps an opportunity for change. I want to say one other thing. My project started as this question of why are states so bad at this? It later morphed into a different question, which is why are states sticking with lethal injection? Why? They can't get the medical professionals. They can't get the drugs. They can't get access to the veins. They have notoriously bad veins. It costs $1 gazillion. Arizona spent $1.5 million. It's in there for drugs for 3 executions and botched all 3. I document them taking suitcases of $15,000 in cash across state lines, getting a private plane. Like all of this stuff is outrageous, violating the law, and it's not even humane. And so what is it? They're pushing this huge boulder uphill. Why? And the only thing I've come to figure out is that lethal injection does something very special. When we talk about the death penalty in this country, we talk about it as an idea. I'm for it. I'm against it, often on tribal lines. Lethal injection keeps the death penalty as an idea. There's nothing to see. These other execution methods, with lethal injection, you don't have to see the sight of blood. You don't have to smell burning flesh. That's the electric chair. You don't have to see the retching and spitting and gasping of the gas mask or a gas chamber. We get to tell ourselves that people are just drifting off to sleep. And that makes it easier to not think about what the state is doing and to not think about what the death penalty actually is. And so I think I want to change that. And all I can think of is this hiding. This is where the state works so hard to hide what the death penalty is. It must be mighty important to maintaining the death penalty because states have gone to untold lengths to maintain this execution method whose sole benefit is making death look like something else. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
No more questions? Anybody else have a question?
So yes, we did. I just want to make sure you guys can see the game.
Oh, I just got a comment. There was a case a number of years ago. It's Robert McKean, and he was scheduled to be executed, but he OD'd on drugs. So they rushed him to the hospital, cleaned him up, then brought him back so that they could execute him.
There's a debasement. You know, it's just like, this is what is done in our name. And it's, yeah. You know, going to these untold lengths, I was talking to a family member of she's the mom of someone who was executed or killed. So she's a victim's family member and is against the death penalty and is part of the abolition movement in Tennessee. And she said, what family members need when when a member of their family has been killed, she said, I needed help getting out of bed in the morning. I needed therapy. My kids needed therapy. I needed a babysitter so that I could get therapy. I couldn't work. I was going to lose my house. She's like, that's what we need from the state. It's like, you know, we're spending all this money on the death penalty, and it's millions, y'all. It's millions. Ohio just did a study in 2024 and said the cost of the death penalty over and above life without parole automatically for all first-degree murders is somewhere between $100 million and $300 million. And these victims are saying, you know, where are my services? Well, the state's broke. You know, and it's like, you're spending the resources here. You are the government. You must serve your people. You know, and it's just like, that's wholly aside from, you know, redemption and the things that people of faith should be thinking about. That's just practicalities, but it's crazy to go to such untold lengths and then not have the things that they really need. And she said, the only people that are thinking about the death penalty are people who are from very high income homes who can get all those other services. Then they're like, yeah, we want this. She's like, that's not what anyone I know is thinking about. We're just thinking about how to survive.
Dick, did you have a question?
Don, was there, and it's kind of both of you, but.
Go ahead and speak into the microphone.
sorry. I'm not familiar with the Steve Fried case you're talking about. Was this kind of testimony brought forward? I mean, really the understanding of what these drugs are in Oklahoma?
The 2 days I was there was mostly Irving Yen testifying.
Wait a minute, Don. Mike, sorry. Excuse me.
The 2 days I was there was mostly Irving Yen testifying, and Fryatt loved him. This is the Glossop versus Gross case that was whether the drug protocol is cruel and unusual punishment, and Fryatt ruled that it is constitutional because they can't feel it.
And yeah, I was just going to say, I spend a lot of time in chapter 3 on that case, on the 2022 litigation in Oklahoma. And, you know, as I have said to others, I take the state's claims seriously. You know, the book is what it is now, but as I was going through it, I was like, oh, are they right? Like, here are the things that they say, you know, and I'm looking through. And in, you know, as true confessions, I wanted the state to be right. I wanted us to not be torturing people, right? I hoped that those studies showed that they couldn't feel it. They do not. And, you know, so their Irvin Yen didn't cite any studies at all. And he's not a researcher. He literally came from his practice. He was like, yeah, this, you know, it's never happened to me. And I'm thinking, well, you know, like, also, you're not using 500 grams of this stuff. And so it was really interesting for the court to be like, he's the one I like. And what I do in this chapter is I look at every single thing, every single study that the state cited in that litigation. And it was pretty crazy. You would have the state, for example, the state expert would say something like, well, to know whether someone's anesthetized, we use this BIS monitor, and this is the range, which is true. This is like actual science in the real world. There's this range on the BIS monitor that suggests, it's a totality of circumstances, but it suggests you're anesthetized and you have to be, I can't even remember off the top of my head, maybe it's under 60 or something like that. Or it's, anyway. And they'll be like, yeah, midazolam can hit that. Okay, what does the study actually say? Yeah, it said there was all of these people and there were 2 of the 25 that hit it. And the study said, actually, it can't. And the ones that did are outliers. So it's that sort of stuff.
Was the cross-examination in that case, though, did it bring that out?
I don't think so.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what
I
was
don't
getting
think
at.
so.
That's what I was wondering about.
And I didn't see, and that's not to say, again, like this, chapter 3 was the hardest to write because I chased it the deepest because I am a researcher and not a doctor. And so, I was looking at more studies. If there was any chance I didn't understand the study, I actually read pharmacology textbooks and anesthesiology textbooks. I cite 5 of them in that chapter because I'm like, look, midazolam existed before lethal injection. What do the anesthesiology, the leading authoritative texts say about it? They say it cannot. It is pharmacologically incapable of achieving a state of anesthesia. And I explain why. And, so yeah.
He relied on his clinical experience. Wow. They asked him over and over, have you written anything or have you read anything? And he said, no, I'm relying on my clinical experience. It's 30 years as an anesthesiologist. That's what this is. And the judge loved it.
But wasn't he also I think a Republican senator?
He ran for governor.
And ran
as
for
an
governor,
independent,
okay.
I think.
Yeah, he
run
did.
as an independent.
And
He couldn't win the Republican primary.
I saw that the defenders did attempt to impeach him on that. And the court was pretty upset and said, well, his public service, that's not impeachable, and kind of how dare you. So I addressed that in a footnote too, and say, look, I've been teaching evidence, federal rules of evidence for 24 years. And that is absolutely impeachment material, because if you think that political affiliation is not associated with death penalty support, see chapter 1. That is literally within the footnote. So I'm like, oh, absolutely. That wasn't inappropriate at all. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the book. Exceedingly well researched. It's a powerful book. Basically, why does the death penalty persist, especially in a state like Oklahoma?
So this is my theory, that the death penalty persists in part. I mean, there are many reasons, but I think lethal injection is a big piece of the puzzle. I think people don't think about it. I don't think people are thinking about it. And to the extent that they are thinking about it, they get to just be like, okay, well, they're just drifting off to sleep. And it looks clinical, and it looks clean and regulated, and everything's just fine. And so I think that's part of it. I think that retribution is a huge part of it. They did this thing And one of the things I say about the book is the story of lethal injection is a story of all the ways that the state cannot be trusted to take life and all the ways that the state has tried to cover it up. And so when I think about the death penalty and people say, well, they deserve it, one of the things I say is, okay, you say they deserve it, that's actually just half of the equation. The other half of the equation is, did the state do what it needs to do to take that life? Might have undocumented, members of, people who can be deported. It doesn't mean you can just put them on a plane, and take them away. We are a nation of laws. Okay. The naive law professor says. But, and so this is what I mean. It's like, even if you say they deserve it, and I think this message at the end of they're not the same person. The person you think you're killing is actually, they're long gone. They're long gone.
And I think it's also the state has to admit they've made a mistake.
Debbie, talk. Say it in the mic because we're recording.
Well, I was just saying that I think also the state would have to accept and admit that they've made a mistake, and they're not going to do that. And if we say that we put people in prison for rehabilitation, we don't actually believe that.
I agree 100%. And, to your point, sometimes I wonder, like, the death penalty is this little corner of criminal law. It's more rare. We've got mass incarceration. We have terrible prison conditions. There's so many other really big problems. Why should we care about this? Now, I'm a death penalty researcher. I'm going to care no matter what. But, why should other people care about that? And I feel like you said it in my introduction. If you're willing to kill someone for what they did, everything else goes. Like, anything goes. Right. Mass incarceration, terrible prison conditions, everything else. If you're willing to kill them, then you're saying you're not worth any humanity. Well, then, it opens up everything. And I just think, what would happen if instead our starting assumption really is every person has an inherent worth? Every person was made by God, and every person has a little, at the very least, a littlest bit of light. And if you just let it grow, if you just let it, be, you just never know what will happen. Because God is in that person, Alpha and Omega, author of all life. And if we started from that position, then not only would we not kill other people, but then how would that make us change the way we see other things too? I'm not saying that getting rid of the death penalty is going to solve all of our problems, but there's a fundamental lens that we look at criminality through, because the death penalty tells us we can throw people away. And I was talking to Sue about this and saying, this book, I'm really proud of my research. It is the hardest thing I've done professionally, but it's been a really interesting opportunity. It's presented these opportunities to have discussions that we're not otherwise having, or that we're having around an execution, where the focus is on an execution instead of like, wait a minute, why do we have this thing? What work is it doing for you? What could we do with the millions of dollars if we really cared about victims? If we really cared about people in society?
Well, we call it here the crown jewel of the retributive justice system. there's a sentencing project that is committed to trying to ratchet down all the sentences. In Europe, the mandatory sentence for any crime is 20 or 25 years. And if we had 25 years as the maximum for a murder, then everything else falls underneath that. And we don't have 60-year-old men in prison that have been there for 40 years. That's the mass incarceration problem, is you have all these guys life without parole, or the 85 percenters that aren't eligible for parole until they've served 85% of their sentence. The sentences are too harsh, and you've got to ratchet them down all the way, and the death penalty would be a good place to start.
I had just one more thing on retributivism. So just again, this isn't a conversation that I've been able to have other than in a church, because I'm trying to, reach all people. But when I think about deception, I think like the age-old deceptive move, it's to mix truth with a lie, right? This is the tree of good and evil. This is the tree of knowledge, right? It's like all the moves are to mix truth with a lie. And I've been thinking about, it's not fully formed yet, but I've been thinking about that being true with the death penalty too. Truth, they deserve to die. Look what they did. They deserve to die. Lie, stop right there. Just stop there. Don't think about the fact that I also deserve to die and everyone else deserves to die. Don't think about the fact you want blood. The blood has been shed. Blood has been shed. Don't think about the fact that my God is not a pocket-sized God. My God can take that person and use it for good. I'm seeing it happen again and again and again. And so it's like, that's the mix of the truth and the lie. The truth is they did this terrible thing. And, under the Old Testament, right? Like, eye for an eye, you deserve to die. And I'm like, but you don't stop with the Old Testament. Our whole faith is, actually, there's a new chapter. And, it's really striking to me that people that support the death penalty will say eye for an eye. And I think, there's a lot of places in the Bible where it says one thing in one place and it says another thing in another place, and you can kind of find the thing that to support what you want. But this one is a little different, because this one in the New Testament, and Don, you're going to tell me, I don't know that verse, you could tell me which one it was, but this one is the one where Jesus said, it has been said that, but I say to you something different. It's the one place where the Jesus points to that very verse and says, that's not for you. And so it's just wild to me that it's, the evangelicals that are pointing to this verse in the Old Testament and rejecting the very thing that has been it is specifically, that's not for you. And I've just, studying executions, I am a God follower, so I'm like, it's not for us, But studying executions has helped me understand why. Because they don't belong to us. They belong to the Lord. And who knows what the Lord's going to do with them. It's not ours. And we're really playing God when we say, you're worth nothing, we can kill you. How do you know what's going to happen? It could be Tex Watson, it could be extraordinary. Now are we ready? Okay.
Well, we'll turn off the microphones and the recorders now and continue the discussion in the back room if you like.
Thank you so much.